Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions on a Wednesday afternoon, 4 p.m. BST. I haven't done a Monday mindset for a while. As you know, Isabella is in our chairs, for Mondays as from now. So I thought it'd be good to do a mindset day. This time I brought in Melanie. We're going to be talking about, Mel?
Hello, Danny. Yes, we are talking about cancel culture and the effects lockdown have on cancel culture and our thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I'll just back it up just slightly for those of the US audience, etc. The basis of around this is the point of discussion. What we'll move on from is Caroline Flack is a TV presenter or was a TV presenter here in the UK, and what happened was there was a domestic dispute. There's multiple reports that cover different things, and it is said in the newspapers and the literature and stuff that I've read is that the CPS wanted a trophy trial, if you like. It was a good name to have on their resume, and of course the mob culture in and around that, places like Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that, which has then led to the poor woman actually committing suicide last year. It was her 40th, or it would have been her 40th birthday on the 2 days ago, I believe. It would have been her 40th birthday, and she committed suicide on Valentine's Day, and then she was found the following day. So I'm not going to dig into her past out of respect, and with this show is going to be very, very sensitive. I know that when I speak sometime it may be misconstrued because I kind of need a better filter on my mouth, but this is purely out of respect. What I want to focus on today, first we'll do an introduction to Mel. She'll give a bit of background on herself and just kind of look at this cancel culture thing. What type of people engage in this? Does people realize that they're engaging in this? And do they really know the ramifications? And Caroline is the perfect example of that. So, Mel, first, you want to give a background on yourself?
Yeah, so I am a mental health counsellor, and I've been practicing for over 10 years. I also trained in coaching as well. So my field of expertise is in the field of trauma recovery. Since I was training in counselling, and after I graduated, and my clients since, my niche was helping people restore themselves after trauma. And I've noted that a lot of that is people not really knowing how to regulate their emotions when we've experienced trauma from the past, and it's happening through relationships. So in particular, I help people who have dated someone and it's gone wrong, and maybe this person had some mental health issues, maybe they had a personality disorder, and if you've experienced pain in the past, then this can bring up everything as well. So what I focus on is helping people to make peace with their past trauma and to cultivate greater awareness of their own patterns, so that they can help themselves in to be honest, it really applies to lockdown at the moment as well, helping people manage with PTSD from being in lockdown.
Yeah, no, this is true. So let's start with cancel culture. What does it mean to you? For the people that don't know the title, most people will. Let's break that out, what it is and what it's about.
Well, that's a good point, because people have different ideas of what cancel culture means. It's one thing to critique someone online, which would involve, I would submit, critical thinking and logical reasoning and being more balanced, versus cancel culture, which is more emotionally fueled. And this is often when mobs will form online to form kangaroo courts to be jury, trial and executioners of this person who's been accused of something. So that's how I personally would define cancel culture, is targeting someone for whatever reason.
Yeah. And so if we were to break out in, obviously you can't just put a label on people, you can see the traits and stuff, but what are the common things that the people that kind of engage in that, from your 10 years of experience or so, what are some of the key things you've noticed, what drives people to do that? And the second part of that question, are they actually aware?
Wow. So there's before lockdown and after lockdown. So Cancel culture is especially well known amongst younger people. Generally, younger people, they've got more free time on their hands. They've got less responsibility. So they have more time to engage in these online dramas and to engage in cancel culture compared to, say, someone who is older, has a family to raise, is working full time, doesn't have the time to get involved, versus now where people are forced indoors and they're online. But generally, I would say there's so many reasons for it. It depends on, like, if someone is a celebrity, people like to project their inner gold onto celebrities, and they also like to tear people down and get a sense of enjoyment out of it. So there's that.
Yeah. So what you're saying there is that projection, someone with their own feelings projecting onto another, therefore that helps regulate their emotions to make them feel better. But from a sadist kind of point of view, take enjoyment from that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. This is the thing. Projection is largely unconscious. Most of us at some point are projecting onto others, and people are reacting. Projective identification. So, for example, someone reads about a story online and it touches upon your own story. Maybe you've experienced abuse in the past, maybe you still currently are, and you haven't really addressed those wounds. And so it touches a sore spot. Reading the story brings up anger, it brings up pain from the past. And the thing about anger is that it bypasses critical thinking. Frontal lobe doesn't get engaged. So instead we react emotionally and impulsively, can write, condemn, say things. And it's so much easier to do it online. Just literally whip your phone out and just, in a few seconds, you can be really damaging in the words that you say. And you asked me, are people aware of this? Generally, projections, people aren't aware of it. It takes a lot of willingness to look at your shadow, to really address wounds from the past, to it that maybe I could be projecting my own issues onto this person. And this person who is the center of this, whether they deserve it or not, regardless, they become a scapegoat for people who haven't really addressed pain from the past. And so their story triggers them, and they can project everything onto this person. Yeah.
And so when you see this, I mean, I'll give you another example. Who can I give another example? Like I used to like Twitter a few years ago. I would have on Twitter more than Facebook, but I found that there it's probably one outside of YouTube comments and probably the Daily Mail, not that I read it, but I know it can be quite vicious in the comments there. I found Twitter to be, when it came out, it was more of a revelation. It was a great place to get bits of news and cross news story. Not that I follow news, but like, let's say it's sports, like I'll follow boxing. And you've got someone like Anthony Joshua, right? He's a world heavyweight champion for those listening in the US. And he's a good guy, right? He's come from poor backgrounds, humble beginnings, won the Olympics and everything else. And the amount of abuse that guy gets is absolutely unbelievable. And you just think, this guy's a role model. He puts money into the community and he supports all these different people, yet he gets a torrid amount of abuse. And I just don't, it doesn't register with me why that was. And that is one of the reasons I come off Twitter a couple of years ago, because it just, for me, it turned into a cesspit. It was just like, really? It's like you go through, and then what you'd end up doing is you look at the comment and it's like very jarring, and you'll click through and you'll see their profile. And then a lot of the time they are under a pseudonym and there's not a picture. And then you can see it's just like their war of hate, they're commenting off it elsewhere. And I just don't understand that part of it, of where the depths of that comes from on that level. And the next part I'll bring in here is that I'm a big fan of freedom of speech, but I'm also a big fan of freedom of speech, but show your face and be accountable for what you say. Does that make sense?
Well, absolutely. I mean, people individually versus people acting in groups. I mean, it's well known through social psychology experiments that people act differently in groups compared to if they're on their own, and especially if they're masked, if they're anonymous. And this is what happens when we're online. We're anonymous. So we can say and we can do things that we wouldn't actually say to someone's face. and with the power of being in a group that agrees with me. And so that empowers me to then think, yes, I can say this and feel justified in doing so.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I've had it, I'm sure because you got your own YouTube channel and stuff, I'm sure you've had your fair share going on. But I found a lot of the time often, if it was, say, like Facebook, it's a lot easier, you know, to track and trace, if you like. And I tend to just phone them on Messenger and that freaks them out. So if someone trolls me, I'll just pick up Messenger and call them and go, hello, and then have a conversation. 9 times out of 10, it's dropped there and then, because I think it's the shock of, Jesus, he's just picked up the phone, and they don't know what to say. And then they'll kind of say, oh, it was only a joke, mate, you know, and that kind of stuff. So it's very interesting how rampant it is online. And I think that is the problem when people don't have to show their identity. Therefore, they don't become accountable for what they say and what they do online, because it's almost like they get to live in this fantasy. It's a chosen fantasy that they engage in, and within that fantasy they're building this new world that they can do literally anything, and it makes them feel powerful, or it makes them feel better. I mean, what kind of data have you seen from that mob kind of cartel process?
What kind of data?
Yeah, is there any data that you see? Now, you mentioned earlier on about the mob where people get together. Is there other things, other experiments and tests that you've seen?
Oh, right, okay. Well, I mean, like, there were lots of studies. I can't quote any off the top of my head right now, apologies, but with football riots that happened in the past, and how when in a big group setting, it's just the power just overtakes the group, and it can be very destructive. So it's interesting now that this is happening online. On the one hand, we don't have the same kind of feeling. Like, I used to go to a lot of heavy metal gigs, you know, before lockdown, and the energy and the feels and the excitement and the passion in a big group, it's something else. It's invigorating, it's powerful, compared to like lockdown, watching a gig at home that quietly, and it's all very muted. So, but then being online, and when I was talking earlier about celebrities, when we project our inner gold onto them, so with celebrities, we really don't know what they're like, really. We just have an idea of what they're like. And so they hold a lot for us. They hold the good and the bad. And then, especially now with being in lockdown, we're all stressed, aren't we? And in states of anger and in states of fear, we say and do things that we wouldn't normally do in certain situations. So the Stanford Milford, what was it? The prison experiment done in the 70s in California. This is an example of when in groups, when put in a certain situation, we act completely out of character. You really do. And we also, if we look back in time, so in the medieval times of the witch hunting, for example, is this not modern day witch hunting sometimes? Just, you just have to accuse someone, and before there's actual evidence, this person's already been put on the stake and burnt alive. And before them, in biblical times of public stoning as well, have things truly changed?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, when you go back, there was a stoning, and then there's ostracization as well, which is another thing where they got banished from the city, and they were off on the outskirts for like a number of years and brought back. But yeah, just going back to the football analogy used there, like I grew up and I used to go raving back in the early 90s. So I kind of missed the first little bit, but the spillover that you had a lot of, I'm a West Ham fan. I was born down the road in Stepney. And so you had the ICF, which is basically a football firm, and then you've got Millwall and stuff, and then each week there's fights on the terrace and everything else. But what you're going back to your gig thing, then what happened from that, acid house kicked in. Obviously everyone's necking loads of E's and stuff, but it changed. It literally changed that thug culture, not forever, but it reduced all the violence. So you'd have ICF and Millwall, which were devastating battles between them before and after matches and stuff, will be hugging on the dance floor. So you've got this thing where music has this power of bringing people together, And I suppose the point I'm getting to is, with this lockdown, people are not able to come together. Zoom isn't enough, right? There's that, you don't get that that same connection that you do, and everyone's sick of Zoom parties and everything else. But it's interesting that you said you went to heavy metal gig and the energies and stuff. And I used to vibe off energies because I used to be a DJ, and there's nothing quite like watching 2,000 people go off to a new record. You've just come out the studio, you drop it, and the club goes off. I'm getting a shiver in my shoulders now. There's nothing quite like it. And I always said, like, even going back to my childhood, when I got into music, that become my family as well. It's such a tribal movement, and about good vibes, as long as it's, you know, the right setting and stuff. So it's interesting with what's going on at the moment is people are very connected, but they're also very isolated as well. And I think this is unprecedented. It is definitely in our lifetime. What are some of the things have you noticed in changes over the last 6 to 8 months in terms of people's mental health online from observations?
Well, not just from online, but also what my clients contact me with. Everyone's anxious and stressed out. People are feeling lonely. We're meant to be pack animals. We are meant to be in communities. And what's been happening in 2020 is people feeling isolated and alone. It's having a massive detrimental impact on people's mental health. Absolutely. Relationships are falling apart. And as I work in relationship counseling, I got a lot of requests that people were struggling in lockdown, having to be constantly in the same space with someone and not being able to see other people. It's not good for our mental health. And on top of that, there's the indoctrination from the media. You know, you turn on the news, and it's purposely meant to say, start with fear, be scared. When the news headlines start, they straight away start with things to trigger us, things to make us feel anxious, scared. It's a marketing strategy ultimately, isn't it? People are more compliant and susceptible, easier to manipulate when they're in a state of fear. So you're stuck indoors, can't see anyone else. You turn on the TV and the news, it's all about corona. It's all the same thing. It's fear, be scared. So already there's these feelings of anxiety, anger, stress, not knowing what's going to happen, and the longing for connection. So what's the easiest way to find connection? You go online. So people are spending so much time online, and then the chances are you're going to come across an article or read about someone because you're spending so much more time online compared to normal. And then you read something that touches the sore spot, hits a nerve, and then everything comes out: anger, the stress, the anxiety. It's like, I've got a reason to get angry now. It's something I've got control over, because none of us have a sense of control. We don't know what's happening. We've had our freedom, our choices are taken away from us.
And so you said you've had an uptick in clients as well, and I'm sure there's other mental health practitioners are as well. Have you noticed the increase in like suicide rates and stuff over the last 6-7 months?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's massive increases in suicide rates. I mean, this wasn't expected. People weren't prepared. This is truly a test of knowing how to regulate your emotions. In my opinion, is it's an opportunity to learn how to like deal with this anxiety and this stress. But I mean, it's easy for me to say because I've got work. You know, if you've lost your work, you've lost income, you don't know how you're going to pay for anything. And sometimes it seems that like suicide is the only way out. If you can't afford it to pay for their house, if you've had your relationship break down because of stress from COVID, it's terrible. It's truly saddening. It really is.
So I think one of the other things I've seen as well, especially within inside of our community, when we do like our in-depths and stuff, I have noticed that people have opened up more. They're saying, look, you know, it has been a tough time, you know, and they've been speaking about it openly. And I think that's kind of interesting. I think we are seeing two sides as well. I think we're seeing people are showing more of their vulnerable side. You know, we had a friend of mine, Yana, on the show the other day. She was talking about she has a therapist before COVID anyway, and she's proud of that. Good for her. Do you see what I mean? Because it was like that become a taboo subject, and it's just I think where we are at the moment is different everywhere, isn't it? Because like we're on our second lockdown here in the UK, and a lot of places around the world either not have come out of a lockdown, from my understanding. I may be wrong. I think India is like that. I think Australia is just on their coming out their second lockdown. I'll stand corrected, but I'm wondering whether, like for me, with the first lockdown, I'd done loads of shows, come online, done all that, and that was good motivation for me. Blah blah blah. But then I knew when the lockdown was coming, I'm like, let's go, let's do it. We've been here all before. Let's go again. And so from October 4th, I've trained every day bar 2. So I get up and train every single day. So it's gone just over a month now. And I think that was been really good as well, because you start your day off really well. You've got the endorphins going and you're buzzing. Do you see what I mean? And I'm wondering whether in our community, because mainly, the content we cover is mainly Amazon, and it's a lot of people sitting at home in their home office working on Amazon. Like, you think everyone was isolated before. Meet an Amazon seller, they've all got Microsoft 10s because they're working like long hours, and we're right in Q4. Selling on Amazon is a difficult task because you get suspended. It could be thousands, if not tens of thousands a day of revenue lost, and it can have a massive impact on the business. What would you suggest for my audience, what they should be doing if they're in this lockdown? I know we can go for walks and stuff, but what are some things if there are people out there struggling?
To really discover creative tools to help with emotional regulation, because now all of us are challenged to think of new ways now to deal with anxiety. Yeah. Where before maybe we can go out shopping, have a drink with our friends in the pub, can't do that anymore. So yeah, I personally think it's good in general when we are forced to look at other tools in our toolbox, and if we don't have them, to craft some new ones up. It's not as easy as it sounds, clearly. Yeah. But familiarizing yourself with your emotions and taking time out to really practice some meditation, maybe, and some mindfulness, because what this does, and this is what I'm quite passionate about, it puts you in, it makes it easier for you to really know what's going on inside of you, and to, when you have more of an awareness of the dynamics going on inside of you, and you can't run away from this. You're literally stuck indoors now, so you can't run away from your anxiety. You can't run away from your stress. You have to face it now. And so to think, okay, well, what's bringing this on, and how can I relax? Quite simply, the best tool for it is for free. It's breathing. It's quite simply taking time out to breathe and engaging in activating your parasympathetic nervous system. Reason why is because of being in lockdown and the stress and the fear and the anger, one gets activated into fight or flight. So, we're pumping out more cortisol, we are narrowing our focus. It leaves us in such an anxious state that if this is chronic, this is prolonged, and this is going to cause us disease, depression, suicidal thoughts, chronic anger, it leads to disease. So we need to seek a homeostasis, need to get balance. And so we need to activate the parasympathetic nervous system so that we can regulate and relax and calm. And in a calmer state, we can engage in more critical thinking, so we don't say things or do things that can destroy another person or hurt ourselves. So as you said, walking, just getting outside, I think, go offline. Put your phone away, turn the TV off, walk away from the computer, and just do what it takes to ground yourself. Make some nice food, learn some self-massage and tapping, do a bit of yoga, listen to some nostalgic music, maybe just go outside, do what it takes to relax. It's important. And I think a lot of people are just maybe feeling too guilty to relax, or too nervous, too stressed, but it's so important for you to relax so that you can rebalance and make better decisions.
Yes. I'm going to read some of the comments here. Hello from mystical land of Somerset. We tend to ignore most nonsense. Just going back earlier on the show. We're boshing loads of ecstasy back in the day. These podcasts keep me sane. Just think about it. Sai also says, it's in the media's interest to drive fear. It makes people keep watching for some possible clarity that will never come. So turn it off. Hazel says, on the school run, it feels like it's changed. More people are talking, it seems, and definitely seem to open up to the struggle. Going back to the point is that people are more willing to be vulnerable and open about it. And Hayes says, I agree, Sai, turned it all off a good while back. So let's go back to the toolkit. What about when you've got people like narcissistic people will not self-reflect, right? And so in most cases, if they've got a false self. So what happens where people like that, it's a personality disorder. And not just, I mean, they might just be traits, or they might be on, a lot of people will be on the spectrum, of course, but what happens there where you've got one end of the spectrum to the other, like you said, CPTSD, and then the other end of the spectrum of narcissism? What happens there where people fail to reflect? They can't open that toolbox. How does that break down for people to look within that toolbox? Or just people that are just very proud and they won't admit it to themselves and they'll just keep soldiering on. How do they access that toolkit? I've asked you a load of questions there in one, didn't I, really?
Yeah, it's all right. So I think sometimes people who are heavily invested in a full self, it takes sometimes tragedy, misfortune, something really bad happening for them to think, okay, wow, actually, maybe I do need to really look at myself. They need like a jarring wake-up call. So that's what comes to mind.
Okay. So what you're saying is that obviously the general reasoning behind that was early, maybe childhood trauma caused it, and then it requires another trauma to kind of help push beyond that and move through it.
Right. Yeah. Well, personality disorders are trauma-based. Absolutely. It's a response to a very hostile environment growing up, along with a genetic predisposition for it. So the cluster of personality disorders, they're on spectrums. People can have traits. People can have full-blown. So one of them can invest heavily in a full self because as a coping mechanism, when you experience a lot of abuse when you're younger, and one would develop narcissistic traits, and so for them to believe in themselves and to keep going, and deep down they actually have really low self-esteem. So a full self helps with that very low self-esteem. And so I wouldn't say they don't self-reflect, but not to the extent where they actually are willing to face their shadow. For whatever reason, it's different with MPD, it's different with BPD, for example. When someone is unwilling to look at their shadow, when I say shadow, I mean pain from the past that they haven't truly looked at, their own edges, things that they're not happy with themselves. So they don't really want to self-reflect, because truly to make a change with yourself, you need to accept your shadow, your dark side, and integrate it and come to a better relationship with yourself. But often there's a lot of shame from the past. That's why they're so heavily invested in a full self. So out of shame, they won't reflect enough to get to the hard stuff, shall we say. So sometimes no one else can get through to them. It has to be adversity that finally gets through to them. That's the sad truth. Right.
That does make sense. So with if we go back to the whole counsel culture thing, what can we do? Like when people are not realizing, I mean, it could be subtle. It could just be a ha comment on the bottom of a feed that has got hundreds of comments on, but you get that kind of a compounding effect, and someone might actually think, well, I haven't really done anything. I was just having a bit of a laugh, but it's at someone else's expense. What can people do to address that if they were participating in that, but didn't realise the level of infliction that is happening on a compounded effect? What can people do to kind of address that?
Listen to your emotions. They're there to guide you. If you're feeling guilty, if you're feeling ashamed, a bit remorseful about what you said, well, good. Listen to that. That's there to tell you to do something different. So maybe doing something different is to think, okay, be honest with yourself. Has this story brought up stuff from my past? And rather than fully addressing it, instead, I'm just taking it out on the person. And if there's any sort of yes in that, if like, there's stuff from the past, there's trauma from the past, there's abuse from the past, and I just haven't acknowledged it, then okay, then take steps to do so and seek out help. And at the very least, like to be able to talk about it and bring it to conscious awareness, because if you're just going to shove it in the back of your mind and ignore your trauma, then in the words of Carl Jung, what we resist persists. So we will find ourselves in situations that what we're avoiding will be in front of us. We can't keep avoiding it. So why don't you take the time to now address it?
I think it was Jung who was talking, who kind of discovered the shadow thing. And didn't he do an experiment where he looked back in on himself and he looked at all corners and stuff, and he didn't necessarily enjoy what he found? I don't know how true it is, but didn't he eventually have a psychotic break eventually at some point, or was that someone else? I think it was Jung.
Yeah, if you go too deep into this work, it can leave you a bit loose around the edges. And I mean, Jung was like he was really into UFOs as well. Then was like the government was like keeping information from us.
Gotcha.
He was very.
He went too far down the rabbit hole. I suppose the other thing, like you said, going back to earlier, people are online, so they end up going down the rabbit hole. And then it goes deeper and deeper, and especially like I don't pay attention, to conspiracy theories. It's not something that's in my wheelhouse that I'm interested in, but I have seen it with people, and people will joke about it. It's like they will spend fucking days going into it and getting, and then it's that consumption of content. I mean, I'd like to speak about that at the moment, because you can all consume. Like you said, need to come offline, right? You need to go off and do things, go to nature and do all these things. But I think you get to that point where I think the TV, YouTube, Facebook and everything else, with so much consumption, what kind of impact does that have on people?
Well, I mean, we're very susceptible to information being put out there. All of us are subject to propaganda, regardless of whether we want to admit it or not. So if we fill our times with just TV, internet, social media, just always reading about other people's opinions, I mean, that's with YouTube videos, people go straight to the comments and think, I'll base my opinions on what other people are saying.
That's a dangerous rabbit hole, YouTube content. Yeah, sorry, go on.
It becomes overwhelming. It becomes saturated, really. It's too much. It's like I said earlier, we need to seek a balance in all things. We need to seek a balance, and it's too easy now to spend too much time online because we're lonely. And to be online, you don't feel as lonely anymore. We're distracted from it.
Yeah.
But it distracts us, really, doesn't it? It can be too much of a distraction.
Would you say also that, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but with all that consumption of content, it becomes an influence on you? But I think it will creep up on people. And this is where people get persuaded with the bombardment of, like a conspiracy theory. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But they go down the rabbit hole. It can be anything. People can consume too much of something is not good for you. So it could be that if you were to look at someone who sat there all day, every day, just watching news and flicking from channel to channel, and someone who threw their TV out the window and just done exercise, what kind of mental state would you judge for both of those people?
It's just they're being programs. They're called TV programs for a reason, is it not?
Yeah.
The more we put in front of this box that's telling us, like, buy this, buy that, think this, feel that, I mean, think with TVs, initially the first TV shows were called soap operas. They were called soap operas because they would be selling soap to the wives who'd be at home watching these TV shows. All about advertising and making money. So the more time that we spend like absorbing these adverts, and thankfully I'm grateful that technology is advanced so we can avoid adverts. So I don't have live TV. I refuse to pay for a BBC license. So I just, actually my computer is my TV. But it's our responsibility to really limit how much we are exposing ourselves to propaganda, to advertising. Quite simply. And we can think for ourselves, so we have greater abilities for critical thinking.
Cool. Cybe's come back again. Do you have 3 tips on how we can prevent our kids from becoming traumatized as adults? I think that's a great question. What are some of your suggestions?
Well, trauma is largely subjective. What one person may be very traumatized by, the other person not so much. So good enough parenting is what we learned when I was training in child psychology. There's no one can be the perfect parent. You can only strive to be good enough, and for our kids to feel secure in our love for them, so that they can talk to us if something is happening. You can't avoid, sometimes tragedies happen and they're unavoidable, but it's how the child can process this, and if it feels secure and loved in its family and able to talk, and the child has community, then studies showing that they're more likely to recover from traumatic incidents compared to kids who feel very isolated from their families. They don't feel safe. They feel like they can't talk to mum or dad or whoever.
Yeah, I think as well is that I'll give you an example. You probably heard the term children should be seen and not heard. And when an adult says that to a child, that might be just said in jest, but that can also have an impact on a child. And I think it's being wiser with your words as well, because you don't always know. And it's like with my daughter Maya, she's lost her brother and sister. So I have to keep it on, both of us keep an eye on that as well, because that's a big traumatic event for her that happened twice in a short period of time. So we have to make sure that she's okay. And I've always been, as a father, I do my best to really choose my words carefully. I don't always get them right, but I do think about what a lot of words you say can't be taken back. And going back to Sai's point, I think we've moved on as a culture, right, where you smack kids. I've never put hands on my child. And there was actually a debate about it on Facebook the other day. But as a kid, I think most of us, I'm not sure about you, Mel, there's a different age gap between us, but a lot of kids, had the belt, or they got slapped, or they were naughty, they got smacked. And I think we've moved away from that culture. But I think now it's more on the psychological level. I think it's the words that are said, and because obviously the words themselves are only 7% of the communication. It's the body language and everything else behind it that carries the resonation there as well. So what would you say on that side as well is, what can parents do to think about that as for the growth of their children, to not, give them not give them reason, but to avoid traumatizing?
Well, I think parents modeling to their children how to process emotions, anger, for example, to teach the kids, okay, if you're angry, take time out, take 10 minutes to yourself, go into another room, listen to some relaxing music, make yourself a cup of chamomile tea, I don't know, and then calm down, and then in a calmer state, then go back into dialogue with someone. A parent showing them that it's not wrong to be angry. A lot of parents shame their kids about being angry, and it's had a massive impact on them in future relationships. Absolutely. The one as well with anxiety, with stress. We, as children, we rely on our parents to show us not only how to navigate life, but how to navigate our own emotions, really. And finding that balance, not mollycoddling your kid and versus not
Yeah.
neglecting your kid.
You made a really good point there, because there's two ends of the spectrum. There's like, I've seen it where people, you got the people pleasing end of things, and it's like the bar's set up here, and like a B plus is not enough. It's demands to have an A, and so they're always chasing that for a validation, or the overpraising. You know, you come 15th in the egg and spoon race, there's your trophy. There becomes your entitlement as well. And it's trying to get that balance to give them a well-rounded perspective on life. And one of the things I been speaking about with my daughter recently, like you said about emotions and stuff, is to identify reaction-seeking communication and sincere communication, and how to deal with that. I mean, she's just coming up to 15, which is probably a bit young for her shoulders in a way, but I think that will help carry on through life. You know, when the kids in the playground, disagreements, these little kind of WhatsApp groups and stuff, and things kick off and they fall out with each other. And she's been learning a lot about reaction-seeking communication versus, you know, sincere communication, and how to address that. And I think that's one of the tools I'm trying to put into her toolkit.
Okay. Well, that's great. That's fantastic. And
but is she too young for me to be doing that when she's just coming to 15? I just thought it helps her out for the future, you know. Yeah.
No, this is actually really important. And along with that as well is, especially with girls, so when they form friendship groups with the all-girl clique, there tends to be like the leader, and there's all different roles associated. And going back to what we we're talking about at the beginning of cancel culture and reasons why we do it. So often it is younger people who engage in it. And so they spend their online, because younger kids tend to be on social media all the time. Someone says something and someone screenshots it and sends it all in the WhatsApp group. And a bit of virtue signaling happens. Like the leader's like, I don't agree with this. I'm going to post. And then there's this expectation of like, okay, well, I want to assert my place in this clique and be accepted. So then I'm going to also comment and put this person down, so that I've got my place asserted, you know, secure in this pack. And anyone who doesn't agree in the group is pretty much ousted.
Yeah, it's almost like a dominance hierarchy. You can kind of see it, can't you, as body language, where the feet are pointed towards the leader. Like, if you can observe it and watch it unfold, you can tend to see who is the leader of the pack there. Just a question here or a feedback from Sai. Being good enough, that's a great takeaway. Thank you. I guess giving them lots of love, patience, and a sense of humor helps. Yeah, sense of humor, I think, is massive as well. I think but there's sense of humor, but then there's at the expense of the child. You know, like, you can have fun with them, but it's if you to have fun at them, you know, tease them on something, I think that could become a bit of a problem as well. So I think, Si, from my point of view, is that you have fun with them, but not necessarily tease them. Now, they've got to learn those skills, because people will tease them as well. But I think it comes down to there's so many little nuances there which can actually make a big impact. But if you've got a good communication path with your children, and you can sit at the table, you can speak, and you can speak openly, and that, I think, changes over time from when they're young to teenage years, where they may go insular and they're growing and they want to keep their level of privacy as well, because you've got your boundaries and everything else. I think it's important that is that each of these stages you go through, you develop as a parent on those adjustments to get there next, you know, where to go next with it. Is there anything else you'd like to cover, Mel, while we're on the call?
Well, with regards to the cancel culture, really, it's quite clear that society as a whole, like, seemingly would like to annihilate someone rather than rehabilitate someone. And I mean, going back to what happened with Caroline Flack as well, and it's what we don't know what happened, but we do know is that realization after you've just been fired from your job when nothing's been proven, that everything's been damaged, they've been annihilated, they know that the character can be annihilated, and there's that fear of that happening, compared to perhaps we can progress into a society where we can work to rehabilitate people and, you know, engage in some critical thinking a bit before condemning someone, before there's even any evidence. I mean, it's different if someone actually, there's loads of evidence. I mean, like the Harvey Weinsteins and the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world, where there's plenty of evidence and they're untouchable. Which brings me to what I want to say is, how about we stop attacking each other, people who've made mistakes but can be rehabilitated, and let's turn our attention on the psychotic 1% elite who keep getting away with things. You know, let's not let's not fight ourselves.
No, that makes sense. I was going to say as well, I've noticed a split on Facebook as well. You see posts that are, over this time, people's frustrations, the posts are a little bit more passive aggressive. I'm starting to see a lot more quote posts as well, but coming out in multiple amounts. And one of the things, and I don't want to go on the political route, I just want to use it as a small example, is having patience with people where you don't have to agree on everything. They can still be your friend. Like, you see it where if one is voting for this one to be president or that one, or same with the UK, it doesn't matter what country it's in. I think sometimes people overestimate that you can have a point of disagreement, like, but you see people fall out over like their political leanings and stuff like that, and they forget the person behind it, their friend, their associate or whatever. And sometimes just that one thing can abolish a great thing all round based on a political leanings, because you're unable to process the fact that I don't agree with you there, but we'll agree to disagree. I respect that. Let's keep it moving. Have you noticed that as well? Is that kind of black and white thinking?
Oh yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, it's become quite prevalent over the years online, especially when it comes to gender identity politics and politics in general, things like that. It can be online, very black and white thinking as a whole. Like, you're either with us or you're against us.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly valid to have differing opinions. It does not discredit you as a person, does not make you worthy of being rejected. It's, again, this is the emotional involvement, thinking emotionally rather than logically. This is why it's so important to know how to regulate one's emotions and to take time out to not respond so emotionally, and to see people as just like you, just with different circumstances and different opinions, and it's okay.
Yeah. Cool. Should we wrap here? What is the best way, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to connect with you?
So if you want to check out my channel, you will see that I make videos where I help people who struggling with relationships, people who have really been, who want to know how to deal with their trauma and to help best manage it. So if you want to get in contact with me, my contact details on my About tab on my YouTube channel, so you can email me. At the moment, so I offer counselling services to people online, and I'm just starting our group support as well. So lots of interesting and new things are happening. Just get in contact by sending me an email.
Excellent. Thanks again for your time. It's been wonderful to have you on. I know it's your first time. I'm sure we can bring you back again in the future on some other subjects. I'll be back here again tomorrow, 4 p.m. BST. We've got another in-depth. I'll reveal who the guest is tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your family. Much love, and I'll see you tomorrow.